My first influences in hand styles came from the graffiti that I grew up around. So it would be mostly names that nobody would have heard because it was the people that I went to school with and the people that lived around my neighborhood. Um, During the time that I started, it seemed that graffiti existed only in tag form. I knew people did pieces, and I knew people did other things, but the neighborhood that I stayed in and the city that I lived in, Miami Beach, all I ever saw were tags. Um, and those styles had all sorts of different kinds of influences. There was like influences from Hialeah in South Miami. There were influences actually from the Bay Area, and there were influences from New York City. And I can go more into more detail about those. I guess you can say the people that influenced me in the beginning were wild style kind of taggers. So at the time, my homie Euler, or Oils, he was doing really wild style and intricate tags that were influenced by the TVC 7-Up BSK FS people. Mostly Terms, 2C, and Katie. And their influences go even further back than that, but we're just going to speak about Euler for a second. He was a really good advocate of complex hand styles. They were all based on some sort of like grid-like structure. So you have KV, who did kind of like a really script style of writing, and then you had Terms, who did this kind of calligraphy style writing. Both of those styles combined formed Euler's style at the time. Also during that time, there was another guy, War, who wrote for IAG and BSK, who was also influenced by the BSK style. And those styles influenced my early development of what I would consider a Miami style. Other writers that influenced me at the time were Gasp, who was really innovative during the early 90s. He was coming up with connections that stemmed from all sorts of areas. And it was just his drive to be able to write his name in so many different ways that helped me with my drive to be able to write my name in so many different ways. So when I started, I took it upon me to do as many styles as I can using the whole entire alphabet, write almost everything that I can using a hand style, and also looking at letters and seeing what you could do with them beyond what you already know. So like, instead of making the top of the E round, you can make it square, you can make it lean to the left, you can make it lean to the right, you can make it pointy. You know, it's those types of like ideas that really like fueled the creative process and like helped me to grow before anyone actually came and told me what to do. So my view, and from what I understand based on my experiences of Miami style, it's kind of like the story of South Hispanic people, or South American, Chicano. It's a combination of a whole bunch of shit. In the early 80s, Miami was heavily influenced by New York. The hand styles that were going on in Miami at the time went from small to big. And according to a couple of things that I've heard from KV, this is because hand styles during that time were all based on things that were in motion. So hand styles were seen in motion. They were on trains. So when you take what you see from a train, move it onto a wall, you kind of do or replicate movement. So when you write in script, and the only reason script was invented is because it's a quicker way than to write regular writing. It slants to the right, but it shows movement, it shows the pace and the quickness. So early Miami tags were all about that. They were about quick, moving, small to big, slanting to the left, kind of leaning to the right. And that's all I can say about that period. Then you have further influences that come from Philly and New York City. And also KV broke it down that his influences were from a certain graffiti writer from Philly and a couple of other New York writers, which combined with the Miami style gave the slant to the left an even more elongated feel. And combining that slanty tallness with the grid-like structure of New York writing made Miami styles crazier and wilder. Another thing that defines Miami style is swoops and bridges. From what I remember, Miami in the 90s, just like everywhere else in the United States, was really heavily bombed. Mostly because the 80s carried on into this era. And there was a lot of gang activity, gangs would tag, kids would tag, taggers would tag, and the buff wasn't really that strong. And this really influenced me to maintain the aspect of tagging. I'd say for about 9 years, all I did was tag. I'd tag up and down Washington Avenue. I'd tag all around my neighborhood. Bus stops, bus signs, garbage cans, labels. And this was mostly because I never really saw the point in doing pieces. I practiced pieces, but there was no thrill for me to go to a pennant, or what everyone out here likes to call yards, to go paint. Take your time and do something nice. Growing up on Miami Beach during the 90s, it was extremely ghetto. It's not really the whole Will Smith situation that everyone is used to seeing, all the video stuff that you see. There was a lot of gang activity, there was a lot of old people, a lot of refugees, a lot of crack, a lot of hoes, and all that shit started changing. It's kind of like if I were to go to the Mission in 5 years, unfortunately enough, and somebody used to say, "Oh, I'm from the Mission," I'm like, "Oh, what, from the tech industry?" Because that's what I see, that's what's in the mainstream, and everyone doesn't know about the past. It's the same shit. And since Miami Beach is so small, and the locals got pushed out real early on, you don't really get to hear these kinds of things, People faded back, and people stopped writing and shit like that. People move on. The reason that I kept tagging for a while is because while I was growing up, there was a lot of partying, clubbing, hanging out. I was able to get into clubs underage. No, there was no real codes, drink 40s in the street and nobody gonna tell you shit. You can just do whatever the fuck you want. And that's all I did was just hang out and party. So what are you gonna do? You're gonna hang out, party, and catch tags. You're gonna walk around the strip, catch tags. That's just what you do. Catch tags in motion. Catch them quick, do some wild styles, do some simples, do some rundowns. And I would say that tagging was definitely a very, very heavy influence on the early parts of my upbringing in graffiti culture.